Alien girl offered the human a modest gift, only later revealing why her counsel stood for him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main character. Jason Wood, a seasoned soldier who had served countless tours in the war-stricken regions of the galaxy, had seen his fair share of struggles. But today, as he stood in the heart of the city on the alien planet Tanora, he had a feeling this mission was different. The air around him was crisp and alien, tinged with a faint metallic scent that seemed to hum with the buzz of strange technology. The city was nothing like Earth. Its towering structures seemed to ripple and change depending on the angle of the light, the streets alive with creatures of all shapes and sizes from across the galaxy. Jason, with his short, military-cut blonde hair and well-worn combat gear, was used to standing out in alien places, but today he felt something else. Something was about to happen. He had been assigned to protect an important diplomatic delegation, including Queen Nisara of the Tan Dominion, a star empire spanning multiple systems. But there was something unusual about the mission that had piqued his interest. The Queen's royal proxy, a biosynthetic duplicate of the Queen, would be accompanying him on this assignment. Jason had heard rumors about the royal proxy before, physically identical to the Queen, but with her own consciousness. What did that mean? What kind of person, or being, was this proxy? He was about to find out. As he stood in the reception hall, Jason's eyes followed the group of Tan officials that had just arrived, their vibrant red skin shimmering under the soft light. They moved with grace, each step calculated. And then, she appeared. Queen Nisara. Or rather, her royal proxy. She was striking, with flowing silver hair and eyes so blue they could have been mistaken for the sky itself. She was beautiful, intimidating, and yet, there was something approachable about her. Despite her royal attire, there was a certain vulnerability that came through in her expression. Jason had been briefed about his role. Keep her safe at all costs, no matter what happened. As he took his first few steps toward her, their eyes met, and for a brief moment, he saw something that made his heart skip a beat. It wasn't just her beauty that had him stunned. It was the undeniable presence she had, the weight of an empire behind her, yet a soft longing in her gaze. "Amla," she said, extending her slender hand toward him, breaking the tension that had built in the air. Jason took her hand, noting the warmth of her touch, so human despite her otherworldly appearance. "Jason Wood, I'll be your protector during this mission," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. As they moved through the city's cultural district, Jason found himself captivated by the way La interacted with the world. She wasn't just a duplicate of the Queen. She had thoughts, feelings, and reactions that were uniquely her own. She seemed to admire the art, the architecture, the culture of the human world. Something told Jason that her purpose here went beyond just fulfilling her duties as a proxy. She had her own questions, her own curiosity. When they stopped at an art exhibit, La lingered in front of a painting, her fingers hovering just inches from the canvas, as if trying to reach into the depths of its meaning. Jason couldn't help but watch her, noting the way the light caught her features, the way she moved with such grace. "This one resonates deeply with me," she said, her voice softer now, more contemplative. Jason stepped closer, unsure if he should say something, but the words came to him naturally. "It's called liberation. It's about freedom and the struggles that come with it." La turned to face him, her blue eyes meeting his with a mixture of understanding and something more, curiosity, maybe even longing. "Freedom," she whispered, almost to herself. "It's exhilarating, but also terrifying, isn't it?" Jason nodded. He had always thought of freedom as a simple concept, but standing here, talking to her, he realized how complex it could be, especially when it was tied to someone's very existence. They continued their walk, and Jason could feel the distance between them closing, though he didn't know why. There was a bond forming, one that neither of them had expected, and certainly one neither of them could explain. Little did Jason know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would test their boundaries, their beliefs, and ultimately, the very foundation of what it meant to protect. The deeper they went into the heart of the city, the more Jason realized that he wasn't just here to protect the Queen's proxy. He was here to uncover something much bigger. And La, the royal proxy, might hold the key to it all. As the days went by, Jason found himself falling into a strange rhythm with La. It wasn't just the work he was doing anymore, keeping her safe and ensuring the security of the delegation. It was something deeper, something that pulled at him whenever she was near. There was a certain grace about her, a calmness that came from her poised nature, but underneath that, he could see hints of curiosity, of wonder, like a child discovering a new world. Jason had been hired to protect her, to ensure her safety during the mission, but as they spent more time together, he realized that he wasn't just guarding a royal proxy. He was guarding someone who was becoming more than just a bodyguard's responsibility. On one of their excursions to a nearby cultural center, La seemed fascinated by the different artworks displayed. She paused in front of a painting of a barren wasteland, with a single flower blooming in the center. Her fingers hovered just inches from the frame, as if trying to connect with the emotions the piece stirred. Jason stood a few feet behind, watching her with interest. "This one is about resilience," he said quietly, almost unsure why he was speaking at all. La's blue eyes shifted toward him, and a small smile played on her lips. "Resilience," she repeated thoughtfully. "I have never quite understood that word." Jason turned toward her, curious about the shift in her expression. "What do you mean?" She looked back at the painting, her eyes deep with thought. "I was created to serve, to protect and obey the Queen's will." There was no room for resilience, only duty. Her voice was soft, but there was an undeniable intensity to it, as if she were struggling to reconcile something inside herself. Jason didn't speak at first. He wanted to say something that would help, but he wasn't sure what. He'd spent his life in the military, but he didn't know how to talk about feelings, especially when it came to something as complicated as what La was experiencing. "You're more than just a servant, La," he said after a moment, his voice firm but gentle. She turned to him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to find the truth in his words. "I don't know what I am," she admitted quietly. "I'm neither fully a queen, nor am I just a proxy. I am something in between, created for a purpose that I sometimes wonder if I even understand." Jason could feel the weight of her words. It wasn't just about being a bodyguard anymore. It was about protecting someone who was caught between two worlds, two identities. He knew that he could never truly understand what she was going through, but in that moment, he wished he could do more for her. He stepped closer, his hand hovering at his side, unsure of how to offer comfort without crossing any boundaries. La seemed to sense the hesitation in him and reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. "You are kind, Jason," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I didn't expect this from a human." Jason's heart skipped a beat at the touch, and he quickly cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "I'm just doing my job," he said with a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. La's gaze softened. "Sometimes, the simplest actions can mean the most," she replied. They stood in silence for a moment, the bustling noise of the city around them fading into the background as Jason and La shared an unspoken understanding. It was clear that this mission was becoming something more than just a diplomatic escort. It was a journey that neither of them had anticipated, but one that would change them both in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. Later that evening, after their day in the cultural district, they returned to the palace. As they walked through the grand halls, La spoke again, her voice low but firm. "Jason, I don't know what will happen during this mission, but I'm starting to realize something important." Jason looked at her, his curiosity piqued. "What's that?" "I'm starting to understand the value of freedom," she said, her gaze steady and sure. "It's not just about being able to make choices. It's about having the ability to shape your own destiny. And that," she paused, her blue eyes locking onto his, "is something that I want to experience for myself." Jason felt a spark of something inside him at her words. He had always believed in the importance of freedom, but hearing La speak about it, with such conviction and longing, made him realize just how powerful it could be. It wasn't just a concept, it was a way of living. And maybe, just maybe, that was something worth protecting. As they continued walking, Jason knew that this mission, and his role in it, had become more significant than he could have ever imagined. It was no longer just about keeping La safe. It was about helping her find the freedom she so desperately sought, and perhaps, in the process, finding his own along the way. As the days went on, Jason and La found themselves falling into a routine that neither had expected. Their time together was often spent in quiet conversation, walking through the gardens of the palace or discussing the art and history of Earth's cultures. Every now and then, Jason would catch a glimpse of La's thoughtful expression, her gaze distant as she pondered something only she could understand. It had been weeks since they first met, and yet every time they spoke, Jason discovered something new about her. La had a way of seeing the world, one that was shaped by her role as the royal proxy, but also one that was slowly changing as she experienced more of Earth's simple wonders. Jason had always been the protector, the soldier who followed orders without question. But with La, he found himself questioning things he had never thought about before. He had always believed in duty and honor, but La made him see the importance of personal choice, of freedom. One evening, as they sat by the large windows of the palace, watching the sun set behind the distant mountains, La spoke again about freedom. "It's strange," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the vast silence of the room. "I was created to serve, to protect the Queen's will. But I've started to wonder if there's more to life than just fulfilling a role. What if I could choose who I want to be? What if I could make my own decisions?" Jason turned to her, his heart beating a little faster at the vulnerability in her voice. He had always seen her as strong, almost untouchable, but in moments like this, he saw the uncertainty that lay beneath the surface. "You deserve that choice," he said quietly, his eyes locking with hers. "You deserve to live for yourself, not just as a proxy or a servant." La's eyes softened, and for a moment, Jason thought she might say something, but she remained silent. Instead, she looked back out the window, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of her cup. "I never asked for this life," she continued. "But now, I'm not sure I even know what it means to be free. Can a person truly be free if they were never given the chance to choose their own path?" Jason didn't have an answer. He had never been in her position, never been someone who was created to serve, but he understood her struggle in a way he hadn't before. He reached across the table, placing a hand gently on hers. "I think freedom means making your own choices, La. It means being able to decide what's important to you, not what others expect of you." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if looking for something. "And what about you, Jason? What is freedom to you?" Jason's thoughts raced. He had never really thought about it like that before. For him, freedom was always something external, something that came from fighting for a cause, from serving his country. But now, sitting here with La, he realized that freedom was more than just a concept. It was about choosing who you were, what you stood for. "For me," he said, his voice steady, "freedom is about being able to live with no regrets. It's about knowing that the choices I make are my own." La nodded slowly, her eyes softening as she took in his words. "Maybe," she said quietly, "we both have a lot to learn about freedom." Jason smiled, a warm, genuine smile. "I think we do." The night passed in peaceful conversation, but as the hours went by, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting between them. La was no longer just the Queen's proxy to him. She was someone who was beginning to understand herself, someone who was exploring what it meant to be free. And Jason? He was no longer just a protector. He was someone who was learning, too, learning what it meant to protect not just a person, but their freedom. As the night deepened, they both realized that this journey, this mission, wasn't just about duty. It was about finding something more, something deeper, together. Weeks passed, and Jason began to notice subtle changes in the way La interacted with him. The connection between them, once forged by duty, was now something more, something unspoken but undeniable. La's eyes had softened, no longer just observing him with the distant curiosity of a royal proxy, but with something deeper, something more personal. And Jason, despite his usual reserved nature, found himself drawn to her in ways he had never anticipated. He had always been the soldier, focused on the mission, but now, every conversation with her felt like a discovery, each shared moment a step towards something neither of them had planned. One evening, as they walked through the grand gardens of the palace, the sun was setting, casting an orange glow across the horizon. The garden was peaceful, filled with the hum of alien insects and the soft rustle of leaves. La walked beside Jason, her silver hair flowing gently in the breeze, and for the first time in a long while, she seemed at ease. Jason couldn't help but notice how different she seemed now. The weight of her role as a proxy was still there, but it was no longer all-consuming. She had found a way to balance the expectations of her world with her own growing sense of self. "Jason," she said softly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about freedom. I've realized something." Jason turned to look at her, intrigued by the serious tone in her voice. "What's that?" She paused, her gaze distant as if searching for the right words. "I've spent my entire life doing what others expected of me. I've never really considered what I want. But now I understand. Freedom isn't just about making choices. It's about owning those choices, about not letting anyone else define who you are." Jason's heart skipped a beat. He had never expected La to open up like this, to share her thoughts so honestly. But there was something about her vulnerability, her willingness to admit her struggles, that made him feel even more connected to her. "I think you're starting to understand it," he said gently, his voice filled with quiet admiration. "Freedom means being able to live for yourself, to choose your path, no matter what others may think." La nodded, her eyes meeting his, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them in that quiet moment, and Jason could feel the weight of their shared understanding. They were no longer just protector and charge. They were two people, learning about life and about each other. "There's something else I've been thinking about," La continued, her voice a little quieter now. "This mission, it's more than just about protecting me, isn't it?" Jason blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, her voice steady, "you've always been focused on keeping me safe, but I think you're starting to see the bigger picture too. It's not just about following orders anymore. It's about something more, something bigger than both of us." Jason's chest tightened. He had never fully acknowledged it before, but she was right. This mission, this journey they had been on together, had become more than just about protecting her. It had become about discovering themselves, about understanding who they were in the context of something much larger than their individual roles. "Maybe it is," he said softly. "Maybe we're both learning something bigger here." La gave him a small smile, her eyes warm with something Jason couldn't quite name. "You're a good man, Jason. I'm glad you're here." The words caught him off guard, and for a moment, he didn't know how to respond. He had always been good at following orders, good at being the soldier, the protector. But now, as he looked at La, he realized that this was something more than just a job. He was here because he cared about her, not just as a queen's proxy, but as a person. And in that moment, Jason knew that whatever happened next, whatever challenges they might face, they would face them together. He wasn't just her protector anymore. He was her ally, her friend. And maybe, just maybe, that was what freedom really was. The ability to stand side by side, not as master and servant, but as equals, as people with their own choices and their own futures. As the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, Jason and La continued walking through the garden, the future uncertain but filled with possibility. They had learned to trust each other, to open up, and in doing so, they had found something more important than any mission or royal duty: each other. As the weeks passed, Jason and La grew even closer. Their conversations shifted from polite small talk to more intimate discussions about life, duty, and their dreams for the future. Despite the growing bond between them, the reality of their positions, the delicate balance between protector and charge, was never far from Jason's mind. He knew that his role was to keep her safe, and that could mean making tough decisions. But as they spent more time together, he found himself questioning the very duty that had shaped his life for so long. The mission was still their primary focus, but Jason began to realize that it was no longer just about protecting La. It was about something far more personal. La, for her part, had begun to open up in ways she never had before. She was no longer the stoic royal proxy, confined by duty and tradition. She had begun to explore the idea of freedom, of making her own choices, and in the process, she discovered a new side of herself, one that had been buried beneath the layers of royal expectations. One evening, as they sat in the garden under the stars, La turned to Jason with a thoughtful expression on her face. "Jason, I've been thinking," she said, her voice softer than usual, "about everything, about freedom, choice, and about you. Jason's heart skipped a beat. He had come to care deeply for her, but he hadn't expected her to speak so openly about their connection. "What about me?" he asked, his voice steady but with a trace of curiosity. She hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. "You've been here for me, not just as my protector, but as someone who understands me, in ways that even I don't fully understand myself." Her words lingered in the air, and Jason felt his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "I don't know what the future holds," she continued, her eyes searching his, "but I know I want to be able to make my own choices, and I want you to be a part of that." Jason swallowed hard, his thoughts racing. This wasn't just about duty anymore. It was about something real, something raw. It was about the two of them, together, shaping their own futures. "La," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I'm here for you, no matter what. You deserve to have the freedom to choose your path. I'll support you in that, every step of the way." La smiled, and in that moment, Jason saw something he hadn't seen before, a genuine happiness, a spark of hope in her eyes. It was a look that told him she was beginning to believe in the possibility of a different future, one where she was no longer defined by her role as the Queen's proxy. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I would do without you." Jason felt a rush of warmth in his chest, but it wasn't just the familiar protective instinct. It was something deeper, something that had taken root in his heart without him even realizing it. He had come to care for La not just as a duty, but as a person he wanted to share his life with, a person whose freedom he would fight for, no matter the cost. As the night wore on, they sat together in the garden, the stars above them shimmering in the quiet darkness. Jason realized that this mission, this strange and unexpected journey, had brought them both to a place they had never imagined. A place where their paths had intertwined, and where they could now choose their own futures. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Jason felt a sense of peace. They had found something worth fighting for, not just a mission, but each other. And as he looked at La, sitting beside him with a soft smile on her face, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Jason and La grew stronger. What had begun as a professional relationship had blossomed into something deeper, something neither of them had anticipated. Every moment they spent together seemed to reveal new layers of understanding and connection, and yet, the world around them continued to remind them of the complexity of their situation. They were from two different worlds, each with its own set of expectations, rules, and responsibilities. But in each other, they had found something they both desperately needed, a sense of freedom. One morning, as the sun rose over the distant horizon, casting a soft glow over the palace grounds, La found herself standing at the edge of the garden, looking out over the vast expanse of the land before her. The air was crisp, the scent of blooming flowers mixed with the earth's rich fragrance, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. Jason had been her protector, her constant companion, but over the past few weeks, he had become something more, someone who had shown her that freedom wasn't just a concept. It was a choice, and it was one she could make for herself. As she stood there, lost in thought, she heard the soft crunch of footsteps behind her. She turned to see Jason approaching, his usual confident stride tempered with a rare softness in his expression. "Morning," he greeted, his voice warm. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" La smiled at him, a sense of comfort washing over her. "Yes, it is," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. "I've been thinking a lot, Jason." He stepped closer, his brow furrowed slightly in concern. "What about?" She took a deep breath, the cool morning air filling her lungs. "About what comes next. About my future." Jason's eyes softened, and he nodded, understanding that the weight of her position had been a constant burden on her. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," he said gently, his voice steady. "You have time. You have the freedom to choose, La." She turned to face him fully, her eyes locking with his. "That's the thing," she said, her voice tinged with a mixture of uncertainty and hope. "I didn't know I had that freedom until recently, but now, I'm not sure what to do with it." Jason placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch light but reassuring. "You're not alone in this, La. Whatever happens next, we'll figure it out together." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the unspoken promise of support and loyalty. For the first time in a long while, La allowed herself to believe in that promise. She had spent her life following orders, fulfilling the role that had been assigned to her. But now, standing here with Jason, she realized that her future didn't have to be dictated by anyone else. She could choose her own path, and with Jason by her side, she felt like anything was possible. "Thank you, Jason," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "For everything." He smiled softly, the warmth in his eyes reflecting the sincerity of his words. "You don't have to thank me, La. I'm here because I want to be." There was a moment of silence, one that was comfortable and filled with the quiet understanding that had grown between them. It wasn't about grand gestures or declarations. It was about the simple, quiet moments that spoke volumes. La took a step closer, her heart swelling with the realization that she had found someone who cared for her, not because of her title or her role, but because of who she was as a person. And in that moment, she knew that the path ahead, whatever it might hold, would be one she could walk with strength, with courage, and with the support of someone who truly saw her. As the sun continued to rise, casting its light over the palace grounds, Jason and La stood together, side by side, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. They had found something special in each other, a bond that transcended their roles, their differences, and the world around them. And for the first time, they both felt free. As the weeks turned into months, Jason and La's bond continued to grow, stronger than either of them had anticipated. Despite the ongoing complexities of their situation, they had found a quiet, unspoken understanding that transcended their roles. La had found her sense of freedom, and Jason had found a new purpose, one that was no longer defined by orders or duty, but by a deep, mutual respect. One afternoon, as they walked through the palace gardens, La stopped suddenly, her eyes drawn to a cluster of flowers that bloomed vibrantly in the sunlight. The colors were unlike anything Jason had ever seen: deep purples, glowing blues, and radiant whites. La knelt down to examine them, her fingers brushing gently over the petals. "They're beautiful," she said quietly, as if lost in the simplicity of the moment. Jason stood beside her, watching her closely. "You've always had a way of seeing beauty in things most people overlook," he said, his voice gentle. La looked up at him, her blue eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. "I've learned that sometimes it's the small things that matter most," she replied, her voice steady but filled with a quiet wisdom. Jason smiled, his heart swelling with affection for her. He had seen her go through so much, her struggles with identity, the weight of her responsibilities, but here, in this quiet moment, he saw a different side of her, a side that was unburdened, unafraid to embrace the simple joys of life. "You've changed," he said softly, almost to himself. La's eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something unspoken between them. "I've had to," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I've spent so much of my life fulfilling others' expectations, I forgot what it meant to be myself. But with you, I've learned to let go of those expectations, to make my own choices. And it feels right." Jason's chest tightened at her words, a deep sense of gratitude washing over him. He had always admired La's strength, but now he saw something else, a vulnerability, a willingness to embrace her humanity despite the immense pressure she had faced. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. La smiled, and for the first time, Jason saw a warmth in her eyes that was completely free of the burden of royalty. It was as if she had shed the weight of her title and was simply La, a woman who had learned to embrace her own freedom. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but full of sincerity. "I couldn't have done it without you." Jason reached out, his hand gently brushing hers. The touch was light but meaningful, a quiet affirmation of their connection. For a moment, they stood there, side by side, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time in a long while, both of them felt ready to face it, not as roles to be filled, but as two people who had found their own paths. La, once a royal proxy bound by duty, now stood free, unafraid to follow her heart. And Jason, the soldier who had once defined his life by orders and honor, now stood with her, no longer just as a protector but as a partner, someone who believed in the journey they would take together. "Let's see where this road takes us," La said, her voice steady, her gaze turned toward the future. Jason nodded, his heart light with the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together, side by side. It was no longer about duty or expectation. It was about choosing each other every single day. Months passed, and Jason and La's connection continued to evolve in unexpected ways. What had once been a relationship based on duty and protection had transformed into something deeper, something neither of them had planned for. La, no longer bound by her role as the queen's proxy, had found herself embracing her own freedom, and with that freedom came a new sense of purpose. Jason, too, had changed. He had once lived a life dictated by orders, but now, by La's side, he had discovered a new path, one that wasn't just about fulfilling a mission, but about choosing his own destiny. It wasn't easy, of course. Their relationship still faced challenges, particularly the pressures from those around them. There were still political implications, responsibilities that weighed heavily on both of them. La was a symbol of power, a leader in her own right, and Jason, though no longer just a protector, had to navigate the complexities of that role in the shadow of her royal status. Yet, despite these challenges, they had built something solid. They had built trust. One evening, as they sat together in the palace's grand hall, the weight of the world outside seemed to disappear. The hall was quiet, the soft flicker of candlelight casting shadows on the stone walls. It was in these moments, away from the public eye, that they found peace. Jason, La began, her voice quiet but steady, I've been thinking about how far we've come. Jason looked at her, his heart swelling with affection. We've come a long way, haven't we? He replied. La smiled, her eyes warm as they met his. I never thought I'd get to this point. I spent so many years living for others, never once asking what I wanted or who I wanted to be. But now, I realize that I've been given a gift, the gift of choice. And with that gift, I found a part of myself I didn't know was there. Jason's chest tightened as he listened to her. He had always admired her strength, but hearing her speak so openly about her journey brought a new depth to his feelings. I think you've always had that part of you, he said, his voice soft but filled with sincerity. You just needed to believe in it, to believe that you were allowed to choose. La's smile deepened, and she reached out, her hand resting gently on his. And I think, she said, you've helped me see that. Jason took her hand, his heart full. I didn't do anything, La. You did it. You found the strength to choose. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared understanding settling between them. The future was still uncertain, still filled with challenges. But in that moment, Jason knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. You know, La said after a while, her voice soft and contemplative. I used to think that I had to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. But now, I realize that I don't have to do it alone. Jason nodded, squeezing her hand gently. You don't, he said, his voice firm with conviction. You'll never be alone, La. Not as long as I'm here. La's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, the world around them faded. In that quiet space, there was nothing but them, nothing but the trust, the bond they had built, and the future they would shape together. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be obstacles, moments of doubt. But in each other, they had found something stronger than duty, stronger than titles. They had found something real. They had found each other. As the seasons changed, so did the dynamic between Jason and La. Their bond had grown from something tentative, based on duty and responsibility, to something far deeper. The challenges they had faced, both external and internal, had only served to strengthen their connection. And though they knew their journey wasn't over, they had learned to embrace the unknown, trusting that they would face whatever came next together. One day, while walking through the palace grounds, La stopped, her gaze drawn to the distant horizon. The sky was a soft orange, the last traces of sunlight casting a warm glow over the land. It was a moment of calm, and La took a deep breath, as if absorbing the stillness of it all. Do you ever wonder, she said softly, what's next? After all this, everything we've been through, everything we've learned. What comes next? Jason, walking beside her, didn't immediately respond. He had been thinking the same thing, but now, hearing La voice the thought, it felt like the perfect moment to confront it together. I think about it all the time, he said, his voice steady but filled with a depth that reflected his own internal journey. We've been through so much, but we've learned something important. That we can choose what happens next. We're not defined by our past, by our roles, by the expectations others have of us. La looked at him, her blue eyes reflecting the fading light. And you're okay with that? She asked, a touch of vulnerability in her voice. Jason smiled softly, his heart full. I'm more than okay with it. I'm grateful for it. We've both had to let go of a lot, but we've gained so much more in return. Freedom, choice, and most importantly, each other. La's lips curved into a small smile, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to fade into the background. It was just the two of them, standing together, sharing a quiet moment of understanding. I never imagined that I would find someone like you, La said, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone who sees me for who I am, not just for the role I'm supposed to play. You've given me something I didn't think I could ever have, hope. Hope for the future. Jason reached out, his hand brushing against hers, a simple yet powerful gesture. You gave that to yourself, La. You've always had it in you. You just needed to believe in it. La's eyes softened, and she squeezed his hand gently. I think I'm starting to believe in it, she said. I think I'm starting to believe in us. The quiet stillness between them spoke volumes, and in that moment, Jason knew that whatever challenges awaited them in the future, they would face them together. They had built something unshakable, a connection forged not just in shared experiences, but in mutual respect, trust, and love. The road ahead was uncertain, yes, but it was theirs to walk. And as long as they had each other, Jason knew they could face anything. Wherever we go, he said softly, whatever happens next, we'll figure it out. Together. La nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. Together, she echoed, her voice steady, her heart lighter than it had ever been. The journey they had started had led them here, to a place of freedom and possibility, and no matter where it took them next, they knew they would continue to choose each other every single day.